Muammar Gaddafi was not an ordinary leader. He stood out as one of Africa's most memorable rulers. Regardless of personal opinions, his legacy continues to fuel discussions today. Despite his 4-decade rule over Libya, Gaddafi remained a visionary with grand aspirations, not only for his nation but for the entire continent. However, his story took an unexpected turn. His downfall was not merely political, but a complex interplay of trust, treachery, and power dynamics. The betrayal he faced was particularly deep as it came from someone he held in high regard, a leader he considered a friend, in a country he had supported wholeheartedly. Ultimately, this trusted ally turned against him, marking a tragic end to Gaddafi's ambitions. Which country and leader were at the center of this ultimate betrayal? Uganda and its president Yoweri Museveni. The plot thickens in 2016 when Museveni openly condemned the US and the European Union for their involvement in Gaddafi's downfall, questioning their interference in Libya and the broader Middle East, asserting that removing leaders like Gaddafi and Iraq's Saddam Hussein was unwarranted. Given his stance, why did Museveni then betray Gaddafi? To unravel this mystery, we must revisit the inception of their relationship and the unforeseen twist it took. Gaddafi's ties with Uganda predated Museveni's leadership, reaching back to the 1970s during Idi Amin's rule. Gaddafi wasn't merely an ally, he stood as one of Amin's staunchest supporters. Whenever Amin's regime encountered turbulence, there was a constant figure offering assistance: Muammar Gaddafi. Libya consistently stood by Uganda, offering military aid, financial support, and political endorsement. Whenever Idi Amin faced threats, Gaddafi dispatched troops, weaponry, and resources to bolster Amin's regime. However, despite the unwavering loyalty and assistance, Gaddafi's bond with Uganda eventually took a dramatic twist, culminating in betrayal. In a surprising turn of events, by 1979, Idi Amin's rule came to an end. Pressured by mounting opposition, he fled Uganda, seeking refuge in Libya initially. However, even Gaddafi couldn't provide a lasting sanctuary. Amin later relocated to Saudi Arabia, where he spent his remaining years. With Amin's departure, Uganda grappled with a leadership vacuum. The 1980 elections were conducted, but discontent brewed among some, notably Yoweri Museveni. Refusing to acknowledge defeat, Museveni contested the election results, initiating a rebellion to seize power. What ensued was a harrowing civil conflict as Museveni's faction battled to topple the existing government. However, a significant challenge arose. Museveni's military was facing a shortage of weapons. Desperate and in urgent need of assistance, he initially turned to the US and the UK, hoping for arms supplies. Yet there was a dilemma. Western powers hesitated due to Museveni's past association with Gaddafi, causing reluctance to engage. Left with limited options, Museveni made a daring choice. He reached out to the consistent supporter of Uganda, Muammar Gaddafi. True to form, Gaddafi swiftly dispatched military aid, provisions, and weaponry. With Gaddafi's aid, Museveni emerged triumphant. Gaddafi's assistance extended beyond this victory, persisting through the intense 1986 civil conflict, solidifying Museveni's authority. However, little did Museveni anticipate that the individual he had assisted in ascending to power would eventually become his adversary. Following Paul Kawanga Semodri's defeat, Libya intervened to train Museveni's military forces. This act of support was substantial in itself, yet it did not conclude there. Museveni, deeply impressed by Libya's intelligence operations, went as far as naming his clandestine agency after theirs. Such was the extent of Gaddafi's influence on him, reflecting the profound trust and admiration shared between the two. Gaddafi viewed Uganda not merely as another African nation, but as a second home. His frequent visits led to jests about his honorary Ugandan citizenship. However, Gaddafi's connection with the country ran deeper than symbolism. He invested substantial funds through the Libyan African portfolio, acquiring a majority stake in Uganda Telecom and securing a significant interest in Tristar Limited, two of the nation's prominent telecommunications entities. A major textile company. And that was just the beginning. One of Gaddafi's boldest moves was convincing Museveni to hold on to Uganda's oil. While Western nations were eager to buy the country's unrefined crude, Gaddafi had a different idea. He urged Museveni not to sell it off, but instead build an oil refinery and pipelines connecting Uganda to Kenya and other neighboring nations. And the investments didn't stop there. Gaddafi went all in into Uganda's economy, pouring money into real estate, banking, and infrastructure. He had a hand in the Tropical Bank of Africa, the National Housing Corporation, Lake Victoria Hotel, and several other major businesses. But Gaddafi's influence wasn't just economic. It was also military. Through Museveni, he played a secret but powerful role in the Rwandan conflict. When the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, launched an invasion in 1980, Gaddafi provided them with weapons and support. And guess who made sure those arms reached them? The Ugandan government under Museveni. The bond between these two leaders ran deep, which is exactly why what happened next felt like the ultimate betrayal. But before we get to that, there's another piece of the story worth mentioning: Gaddafi's fascination with the Toro Kingdom. In 2001, Gaddafi became deeply interested in this small, but historically rich monarchy within Uganda's borders. What made this especially intriguing was that its king, Oyo Nyimba, was just 9 years old at the time. Yet despite his young age, Gaddafi showered the kingdom with attention and support, further cementing his connection to Uganda. Muammar Gaddafi's influence in Uganda wasn't just political or economic. It extended into culture, religion, and even military affairs. One of his most striking contributions was in the Toro Kingdom, where he funded major projects including the construction of the Grand Toro Palace. But Gaddafi's generosity didn't stop there. He also left an unforgettable mark on Uganda's Muslim community. His financial support helped build one of the most stunning mosques in the country, a massive structure capable of holding at least 3,000 worshippers. Today it stands as the second largest mosque in East Africa, a lasting testament to his deep involvement in Uganda. His connection with Museveni was just as personal as it was strategic. During his many visits, Gaddafi openly joked with him about staying in power forever. He even questioned why Museveni bothered with elections at all, hinting that he should just rule for life. And it wasn't all talk. Gaddafi backed Museveni in significant ways. He played a direct role in boosting Museveni's influence, even promoting his son in the military, elevating him from captain to major. When it came to Ugandan elections, Gaddafi was right there in Museveni's corner. In both the 2001 and 2006 presidential campaigns, he provided crucial support, helping Museveni secure victory. From the outside, their relationship seemed ironclad, built on trust, loyalty, and years of mutual benefit. But as history has shown, no alliance is ever truly unbreakable. So, what changed? What led Museveni to turn his back on Gaddafi after years of unwavering support? To understand this betrayal, we need to look at two major factors: Western interests and Gaddafi's ambitious vision for Africa. If you've ever heard talk of a United States of Africa, chances are Gaddafi's name came up. He was one of the most vocal advocates for a single unified African government, an idea that sparked both admiration and alarm. Like Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah before him, Muammar Gaddafi was determined to unite Africa under one powerful bloc. In 1989, during a major summit, he managed to convince 45 African leaders to approve the creation of a new organization, the African Union. This replaced the decades-old Organization of African Unity and was meant to bring African nations closer together. But Gaddafi wasn't just thinking about unity on paper. He had a much bigger dream: a United States of Africa, strong enough to stand on its own against global powers. And he wasn't just talking, he put his money where his mouth was, funding roughly 15% of the African Union's budget during his time in power. But not everyone was on board. Western powers saw this idea as a direct challenge to their influence in Africa. And even within the continent, some leaders weren't too keen on handing over any control. A powerful united Africa meant that individual influence would shrink. Surprisingly, one of the strongest voices against Gaddafi's dream was none other than Yoweri Museveni. Yes, the same Museveni who had benefited greatly from Gaddafi's support. The same leader who had received military aid, financial backing, and political favors from Libya. Despite everything Gaddafi had done for him, Museveni wasn't willing to embrace this vision of unity. But why? What made him turn his back on Gaddafi's plan? For starters, Museveni wasn't about to let go of his own power. He had worked too hard to establish control over Uganda, and the idea of answering to a higher African authority didn't sit well with him. Gaddafi's grand vision might have excited others, but to Museveni, it was a direct threat to his leadership. He spoke about Gaddafi's plans in a careful diplomatic way, never openly attacking the idea, but also never fully supporting it. It was clear that while he appreciated Gaddafi's ambitions, he had no interest in giving up any of his own influence. For Museveni, it was simple. If anyone was going to lead, it had to be him. No exceptions. Museveni wasn't just a leader in Uganda. He was becoming a key player in regional politics. His growing influence extended far beyond his borders, and he quickly became a valuable ally to Western powers. His military played a major role in conflicts across Africa, especially in Somalia, where Ugandan troops were deployed to serve Western interests. But Museveni wasn't just offering soldiers. He also provided strategic support, sharing intelligence and working closely with agencies like the CIA. At one point, he even bragged about taking a stand against Gaddafi. "I was fighting Gaddafi before you even started." That statement alone made it clear where his priorities lay. So when Gaddafi's dream of a united Africa was formally discussed at an African Union summit in Accra, Ghana, in 2007, Museveni wasted no time in shutting it down. He strongly opposed the idea, knowing it could put him at odds with the very powers that helped keep him in control. Backing Gaddafi's vision would have meant challenging the West, and that was a risk Museveni wasn't willing to take. He understood that the same forces propping him up could just as easily remove him from power if he stepped out of line. But at the same time, turning his back on Gaddafi wasn't without its risks. The Libyan leader had been a major source of financial and military support for Uganda, and breaking ties with him could leave Museveni vulnerable. Still, he made his choice. During a visit to the United States on June 13, 2008, while attending his son's graduation, Museveni had a private discussion with Jendayi Fraser, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. In that conversation, he made it clear that he didn't see a united Africa as a realistic idea. He pointed out the continent's diverse languages and cultures as obstacles and accused Gaddafi of using money to buy the support of smaller nations, making it difficult for them to express their true opinions at international meetings. Museveni also had another fear, one that went beyond politics. As tensions between him and Gaddafi escalated, he started to worry that the Libyan leader might try to take him out. He feared that his plane could be targeted while flying through international airspace. So he made a bold move. He reached out to the United States for protection, and Washington was more than happy to provide it. For Gaddafi, Museveni's growing ties with the West weren't his biggest concern. What really unsettled him was how Museveni's influence in Uganda kept expanding, making it harder for him to push his own agenda. Then, in 2008, Gaddafi made a surprise visit to Uganda. His arrival wasn't just a diplomatic stop. It sent shockwaves through Museveni's government. Some even suspected it was part of a larger plan to challenge Museveni's rule. During a speech at an Arab youth event, Gaddafi made a bold statement. He shifted the conversation away from elected leaders like Museveni and declared that his new strategy was to work directly with traditional African rulers. His goal, to unite Africa under a single leadership, not through politicians, but through kings and chiefs who had deep historical ties to their people. The following year, Gaddafi put his plan into action. He invited traditional leaders from across Africa to discuss his vision for a united continent. But before Uganda's rulers could even consider attending, Museveni blocked them from going. He saw this move for what it was, a direct challenge to his authority. What Gaddafi didn't know was that Museveni had already been working behind the scenes to weaken him. Museveni convinced him that the US had turned a new page and was willing to invest in Libya. Under one condition, Gaddafi had to give up his weapons of mass destruction. Gaddafi agreed, believing that dismantling his nuclear program would bring Libya closer to the West. But after private talks with British diplomats, he discovered something shocking. Museveni had sold him out. The Libyan leader was left questioning everything. He had trusted promises that now seemed empty. Publicly, he began demanding answers, saying that Libya had kept its end of the deal, but still waiting for the benefits that was promised. "We were told that President Bush is a man of his word," he said, "but now, we're not so sure." Gaddafi's critical error proved to be a costly misstep, leading to his downfall as he willingly relinquished his most potent leverage, rendering himself vulnerable as adversaries encroached from all directions. Since Gaddafi's demise, Museveni has endeavored to emerge as the torchbearer of African unity, particularly in financial and security realms. However, a hurdle looms large. Despite his influence, Museveni lacks the larger-than-life charisma and vast resources that once lent credence to Gaddafi's grand vision. Even if Museveni persists in advancing this agenda, garnering substantial support appears improbable. The very forces that orchestrated Gaddafi's demise would view Museveni as a potential threat. Ironically, these forces align with the Western powers Museveni aligned with when he distanced himself from Gaddafi. In a surprising 2021 revelation, Museveni criticized the myopic strategies of these Western nations, the same entities he had assisted in their mission to oust Gaddafi. While his altered rhetoric was evident, it failed to rewrite the annals of history. The irreversible damage had been wrought. A stark symbol of Gaddafi's fading legacy materialized when Uganda opted to rename the Grand Mosque, originally constructed and funded by Gaddafi, erasing his name from its facade. The mosque underwent a name change mere 2 years following Gaddafi's demise, a strategic gesture aimed at fostering amicable ties with Libya's fresh administration. Perhaps Museveni's most grievous error wasn't his collaboration with the Western powers, but rather his act of treachery against the singular African leader he had long regarded with apprehension. As time progresses, a definitive reality emerges. When Museveni's tenure inevitably draws to a close, there will be no ally remaining to shield him from the very forces that once supported his endeavors.